far refused to answer violence with violence, but promised that from now on, security forces will respond differently. That's as activists returned to the focal point of the unrest in Istanbul's Taksim Square following brutal clashes with police, which left around 1,000 people injured. Officers in riot gear stormed the square on Tuesday, firing tear gas and rubber bullets, a crackdown which Amnesty International called unprecedented. Anti-government rallies were triggered almost 2 weeks ago over the police response to a peaceful demonstration against the demolition of a park. Earlier, my colleague Andrew Farmer spoke to RT's Irina Galushka in Istanbul, where she reports that tensions are near boiling point.
There's immense police presence all over the city, especially in the Taksim Square area. They're literally on every single corner, in every nook and cranny, there is a policeman or a police officer, and it's riot police, and they're fully prepared. They're actually at this moment lining up along the border of Taksim Square and GEZI Park, and some of the protesters, which by the way have been growing increasingly in number over the past several hours, they're lining up sort of right in front of them. So we're looking at some very serious tension, sort of a brewing confrontation at this point. The protests were dispersed yesterday very violently, so a lot of people, ourselves included, are actually expecting to see something very similar. So everybody's kind of on the edge of their seat.
Well, in an attempt to resolve this crisis, we do know that Erdogan has been trying to talk to the protesters, hasn't he? Has anything come of that?
Absolutely not, you can say. First of all, we have to mention the fact that there's word out there in GEZI Park, which is kind of the home of the protest, is that the people who are there at the meeting with Erdogan don't really represent the people who are here on the square or who are out there in the park. And that actually has been the problem from the get-go, is that every time there's a government official meeting with the members of the opposition, people in GEZI say they don't really represent us. Yes, they're members of the acknowledged opposition, but they're not people who have spent hours upon days here in the tents under the open sky protesting or letting their voices be heard.
Protester and blogger Arzu Gabela says that despite the intense police operation and accusations from the government, she doesn't see any sign of the protests ending anytime soon.
I don't see it end all of a sudden in 24 hours just because Prime Minister is willing so. He's been actually talking about this for the past 2 weeks, and none of the protesters, none of the original protesters from GEZI Park have left the park. I think it's all has to do with the police. For the past 2 weeks, once the police retreated from Taksim Square, there was no violence. It was very peaceful. It was very cheerful. And in fact, the park itself almost had like a festive feeling to it. But as soon as the police was back, violence came back to the park, came back to the area around the park. I don't think the government is taking it seriously. In fact, Erdogan is blaming everything that's been happening in Turkey on the protesters. The fact that the economy is getting affected by this, the fact that tourism sector is getting affected by this, and the fact that Turkey is getting a bad image is affected by the protesters. And he is the sole responsible figure for all of this.
And we've been following events in Turkey since the beginning of protests. RT's international crew was actually tear-gassed along with other demonstrators when they were caught up in the violent clampdown. Find out the latest developments online at rt.com. One of the biggest names in global finance, MSCI, has stripped Greece of its status as a developed market. The debt-saddled country is now classed as an emerging economy. The embarrassing downgrade comes at a bad time for the government, which is entering a political crisis over